Hello everyone, and welcome to the Synology product online training. We have an awesome topic for everyone here today, going over surveillance storage and capacity planning, taking a special look at realistic sizing, retention strategies, and long-term total cost of ownership. Before we begin today, some introductions are in order. My name's Cody. I'm a product manager here at Synology, and I'll be your guide for this one this time around. On the agenda for today, we're going to take a look at surveillance storage for businesses today, and then we're going to move into variables that influence the total storage cost whenever you're running a surveillance deployment. We're also going to discuss how you can build a scalable storage framework. Then we're going to move into a demo on Synology's NVR Selector, a special tool on our website that allows you to calculate how much storage you would need, how much network you would need for a specific surveillance configuration utilizing Synology's surveillance station. And then we're going to move into managing costs if you're going to use Synology as your NVR or as third-party storage for another surveillance platform that you might be running in your ecosystem. Moving on into Section 1, Surveillance Storage 101. Physical security is an area in IT where storage requirements are increasing drastically. And this is largely due to high-definition cameras, 4K cameras, and the like. The quantity of cameras is also rising, so scaling your storage to meet that can be tough to keep up as you're scaling the system. There's also longer retention times, specifically because of either internal business policies or compliance requirements that the organization might be bound to. Lastly, there's also increased need for analytics and smart features, which may increase the storage loads or storage requirements for your surveillance storage system. So, what are the surveillance storage planning pitfalls that Synology commonly sees on our deployments? The most common thing we see in physical security is users will underestimate the growth, the needs of their system over time. So this leads them to expanding reactively, so they didn't potentially plan for their storage needs correctly, causing them to overspend. And this increases your total cost of ownership past what you already planned for, and that results in increased operational risk overall. Moving on into Section 2, variables for influencing your surveillance storage. So here are some of the key capacity factors that really influence your surveillance storage requirements. The top one is camera count, followed closely by resolution in the codec that the actual camera is using. So the amount of cameras, the overall resolution, 4K, 5 megapixel, etc., are the key items that typically increase your overall surveillance storage needs. Frame rate is also a significant driver for your overall storage needs, as that can change the amount of data that is actually being streamed over to the Synology storage array, for example. And finally, there's your recording schedule. 24/7, 365-day recording has a drastically different storage requirement than recording that only occurs on motion detection. Another often overlooked item that multiplies your surveillance storage requirements is the retention requirements you may need to abide by in specific industries. For example, healthcare, education, the public sector, and retail all have vastly different policies or are bound by vastly different compliance requirements, meaning that they have to retain data for longer, or they need shorter retention for quicker search and retrieval for forensic analysis, as just a quick example. So oftentimes, the retention policies or your compliance requirements can be overlooked when planning your physical security deployment. Moving on to Section 3, how to build a scalable framework for surveillance storage. So, steps to actually build a scalable framework for your surveillance storage really center around these three main steps. We want to begin by identifying our usage requirements. We should assess current storage consumed per day and also our retention needs based on the pitfalls we just discussed. You also want to build limits into your planning of this system. What we mean by that is we want you to plan ahead for specific thresholds that indicate that you need an additional unit or you need to expand your storage overall. This functions as your plan that helps you mitigate unnecessary risk due to growth of your surveillance system. And finally, you want to plan for your future. So often we have surveillance deployments out there in the field where we deploy 50 cameras, 100 cameras, and then you need to add, 5 cameras or 10 cameras or what have you. Depending on your recording and your camera quality settings, for example, that can drastically change the amount of storage you actually need on your system. Let's think about adding a camera, and the camera settings are as follows. We're going to retain the camera footage for 30 days. We're going to record for 24 hours. Our video format is H.264. Our resolution is 4K, and our frames per second is 30. So what that generates in this kind of environment is an additional 2.78 terabytes of storage requirements. And that's a lot of space, especially if you're considering you're not adding just one camera, but maybe a handful, or you purchased a new company or built a new building and you didn't plan for the cameras that would be required in that space. So if you jump this camera count from maybe one additional camera to 10 now, well, it's completely different. At that point, you're adding an additional 27 terabytes of storage requirements to your surveillance deployment. Okay, let's now take a look at the Synology NVR Selector on the Synology website. This is a tool that's going to be utilized to help you decide on what hardware to purchase for your Synology deployment. Now, this is specific to utilizing Synology for surveillance station, where the Synology NAS is your NVR. This is also a good tool to estimate roughly how much data movement is going to be required across your network and total capacity requirements based on the camera settings you set up here. So what we're going to do first is build an environment where we have around 30 cameras, 30 days to store, H.264, 4K resolution, and 30 frames per second. Now, once we hit recommend, this tool will spit out the bandwidth and total disk space requirements for the settings that you input into the fields above. So we need 270 megabits per second and around 83.4 terabytes to be able to properly store and handle this kind of environment. Now you'll notice we have 30 cameras and 30 frames per second, so our total FPS load is 900 frames per second in the settings you see here. So we need to find a system now that has total frames per second capabilities that are above the column that you see here for the frames per second numbers, the 550, 2200, etc. On the column right adjacent to that, you're going to see how many NAS would be needed for that model to accomplish what you need. You'll notice that most of the Synology systems are maxing out at around 800 because we chose H.264 as our video format, and that's quite expensive in terms of NAS resources. So if you're lucky enough to have cameras or be deploying Synology cameras or other cameras out there that are capable of H.265, you can actually have more efficient disk usage on your NAS device. And usually on those systems, whenever you move up to H.265, they have a higher FPS threshold at a given resolution. So let's go ahead and check out what would happen if we actually move our video format to H.265, and that's the only thing we change. You'll notice our total disk space requirements is dropped by almost 30 terabytes. Now we only need about 58.4 terabytes to be able to handle this. And now we have many different options to be able to handle this deployment with one Synology NAS device. Now, these systems would be fully maxed out. They'd have their maximum amount of cameras. You'd have no growth in terms of being able to add more cameras. So if we choose an RS2825 RP Plus or an SA3610, you can see we can have a higher FPS threshold, and we could add several additional cameras on top of our already established deployment. Remember, we only need 900 FPS. So if we chose the SA3610, for example, with the 1200 FPS, we're only using 900 FPS there. We'd still have about 25% of its total capability left over. So if we needed to add additional cameras later on, we'd have the resources on the NAS to do so. It's important to note, however, these are pointers in utilizing a Synology NAS as a single NVR. Please note, in our other Synology product online trainings, we've discussed another solution inside a Synology surveillance station called Central Management System, or CMS. You can horizontally scale this system with additional Synology NAS managed under one pane of glass. So if you have a system that is several hundred cameras, for example, you'd be looking at HD 6500 or multiple Synology NAS to meet your needs. One final thing I'd like to showcase here inside of our website is if we click on one of these devices like the SA3610 and we go to the software capabilities and specifications on the system, and we scroll all the way down to surveillance station, you can also see the FPS totals for these devices here. So utilize the NVR selector and also plan ahead and make sure you have a system that has a little bit of extra FPS than you need at your absolute maximum right now. That means you'll be able to add additional cameras a little bit later, just in case you wanted some additional coverage or added capabilities on top of that. Now, many of the Synology product online trainings have really focused on surveillance station, but it's important to note that Synology can be used for more than just surveillance station in terms of physical security. So, yes, you can use your Synology NAS as its own NVR utilizing surveillance station. You get your core services with the NAS, perpetual licensing, and easy scalability that you own inside of that platform. However, there's many of you out there that may operate different surveillance deployments in different platforms out there. And since Synology is such a wide open platform that's highly interoperable over various different protocols that are compatible with the system, Synology is an excellent third-party storage system for other surveillance platforms out there, allowing you to expand existing storage capacity. There's compatibility with existing infrastructure, and it's certified for VMware, Hyper-V, and other hypervisors that you might use as the core infrastructure for running the VMs involved with those surveillance platforms. Let's take a deeper look at the Synology HD6500. This is our largest NAS device that we offer in our entire lineup. So this is great for large-scale surveillance storage deployments. It starts off with 60 bays in the head unit and scalable up to 300 drives. So the HD6500 in Synology Surveillance Station is capable of 500 or more cameras on a single head unit inside of the Synology Surveillance Station platform. Now, if you want to use an HD6500 as surveillance storage, we have several deployments already out in the field with multiple HD6500s serving as backend storage for other surveillance platforms. So if you have high density surveillance storage needs, the HD6500 is an excellent candidate. Moving on into section 4 on managing costs. Let's cover how Synology reduces long-term costs, be it if you're using Synology Surveillance Station for your deployment or utilizing Synology as a third-party storage system for another surveillance platform. First off, Synology helps you reduce your storage footprint. We have NAS from simple 2-bay systems all the way up to 300-bay systems with an expanded HD6500. You can also add capacity incrementally. You don't have to fill your Synology NAS completely with drives from the very beginning. If you have free drive bays in your head unit, you can add additional drives and expand your capacity if you're on RAID 5 and 6, for example. And if you fill up your head unit, there's also usually an expansion unit you can utilize with your NAS if you're in the Plus series or up, and you'll be able to add additional capacity that way. If you fill out your head unit and all your expansion units, then if you're using Synology Surveillance Station, you can utilize Surveillance CMS to horizontally scale the system with additional Synology NAS you might have in your environment. There's also less admin overhead. Synology has a range of tools to help you manage your fleet of devices, be it through Synology Surveillance Station or just using Synology as storage for another surveillance platform. There's also no additional tools required to manage these systems. There's a one-time fee with Surveillance Station for the camera licenses, and that's it. There's no additional fees to use Synology as storage in iSCSI, NFS, SMB, etc. And because of that, that simplifies your total cost of ownership. There's no ongoing fees associated with using Synology storage in Surveillance Station or for another third-party platform. And if you use Synology's NVR Selector tool, you'll have planned ahead to help you control your total cost of ownership. As you can see, there's a wide range of Synology solutions to help you operate your surveillance system. Before we end today, I would like to leave you with a couple extra resources. Now, if you're a business user with your own internal IT team, go ahead and reach out to onboarding@synologyamerica.com and we can get you connected with some resources there. If you're a channel partner, reseller, etc., go ahead and reach out to sec_sales@synology.com and we can get you connected with your account manager. Now, that about wraps things up here today. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in, and we will see you next time.